Welcome to Decode, first episode of From Nothing to Meaning. Today, what I want to talk about is not something filled with heavy scientific terms. It's a question that has crossed every one of our minds at least once, but none of us really took it seriously. We just let it pass. In science classes or in scientific explanations, I've rarely seen this kind of question being asked or anyone genuinely trying to answer it. And that question is, why is there something instead of nothing? Pay attention. I'm not asking how it came into existence. I'm not asking what came into existence. I'm asking, why did existence happen at all? When it comes to our universe, science has explained how it came into being, or at least tried to. Up to a certain point, science explains what happened. Big Bang, particles, energy, space, time. Science explains the processes by which these came about, but why did it have to happen? That question is very basic, but it's also uncomfortable. Because if you ask it honestly, a lot of other questions immediately follow. That's why we usually avoid it. But avoiding this question creates a serious problem. We begin to assume many things without realizing it. Those assumptions lead to wrong conclusions and to seeing the world in a distorted way. That's why this question is extremely important. When science explains existence, it almost always starts by assuming that something already exists. Dimensions already exist. They interact, they collide, and from that, the universe emerges. Fields already exist. Energy already exists. No matter where you look, something is already there. That itself is an assumption. The same thing happens with the common idea that God created everything. God exists. God created everything. Okay, fine. But then the next question arises. How did God come into existence? That's where the conversation stops. It just exists, we say. Here's something important to notice. Whether it's science or religion, both are doing the same thing here. They both assume existence. One calls it God. The other calls it dimensions, fields, or energy. But the question doesn't change. Why does anything exist at all? This is where we need to look at nothingness itself. What does nothingness actually mean? Is it an absolute zero state? When we say nothing, what we usually mean is a state with no change. Exists does not exist 1, 0. If that's all there is, then both states are practically the same, because there is no change. An unchanging exists and an unchanging does not exist are indistinguishable to us. From our perspective, both are nothing. So if we want to say something exists, what do we actually need? We need change. Only when there is change can we detect a difference. And only when we detect a difference do we say, something exists here. This is where possibility comes in. But there's a common confusion here. Many people think if something is possible, someone must make it possible. That's incorrect. Possibility is not a decision. Possibility is not an action. Possibility is not something someone has to do. If possibility exists in nothingness, is there anything controlling it? No. Nothingness means nothing is there. No rules, no laws, no boundaries, no constraints. In everyday life, when we say something can't happen, it's because something prevents it. A wall, a rule, a force, a condition. These are constraints. But in nothingness, the very idea of constraint doesn't exist. So if possibility exists in nothingness, there is nothing to stop it. That's why possibility has complete freedom. It can change in any way. It can reach any state. It can move in any direction. Because there is nothing that can say, this must not happen. One small clarification here. When we say possibility moves, we're not talking about movement in space. We're not talking about movement in time. Space and time are already concepts of existence. Movement of possibility means change. Change means a state becomes different. But a single change is not enough for recognition. Something changes and then disappears again. That alone is not existence. So what do we need? That change must happen again. Not once. Again. 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 And when we say again, we're not talking about clock time, not seconds, minutes, or years. What we're talking about is an axis, a before-after axis, a direction where one state follows another. That is the most basic form of time. When a change happens again and again along this axis, change, 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 a chain forms. That chain creates continuity. Without continuity, nothing can be recognized. When continuity exists, we can say, this is the same thing. That's where identity appears. And when identity appears, we say, something is persisting. When changes repeat in a similar way, we can conceptualize them as a pattern. This is not a mathematical definition, it's a conceptual tool, a mental construct. But it's useful. A pattern is the recognizable history of changes. If one pattern can be distinguished from another, it qualifies as a pattern. When patterns repeat, they begin to influence themselves. This is not a property given by someone. It is how probability behaves. Changing probability, when repeated, reinforces itself. A reinforced pattern eventually becomes stable. When a pattern stabilizes, two possibilities remain. Exists, does not exist. When we talk about existence, we only care about the exists side. Patterns that cannot support existence fade away. Patterns that can continue. The universe did not exist because someone created it. It wasn't that one change happened and suddenly everything was ready. The universe exists because patterns that could persist did persist. What couldn't remain disappeared. What could remain is still here. That's all. This is not heavy science. This is not a philosophy lecture. This is a basic line of thought we usually ignore. But by ignoring it, we keep asking unnecessary questions again and again. The universe does not need a purpose to exist. Some of you listening might be thinking, is this denying God? No. Whether God exists or not is not the topic here. What we are saying is simple. Existence does not require a creator. Because existence is not an intentional act. Existence is not a magical event. Existence is not something someone decided to make. In the logic we discussed, existence is a natural outcome. If possibility exists in nothingness, and possibility can change, and possibility can repeat, then stable patterns are possible. And if stable patterns are possible, then existence is possible. That's the point. Existence is not the result of purpose. Existence is not the result of intention. Existence is the result of stability. That's why existence is not magical. It doesn't need anyone. It doesn't require a creator as a logical necessity. This is not an attack on God. It simply says, God is not logically required to explain existence. You still can say, God existed. God intentionally created the universe. Okay, but then the next question remains, how did God come into existence? And the loop continues. That's why Dcode takes this position. We don't need extra assumptions. Without adding a creator, pure logic and pure probability already show that existence is not just possible, it is inevitable. This is not a matter of faith. This is not a matter of belief. It's a logical statement. If nothingness has possibility and possibility can change and repeat, then stable patterns are possible. If stable patterns are possible, then existence is possible. We can see the universe. That is the final evidence. The outcome is right in front of us. So we can say, existence did not happen because of someone's intervention or someone's decision. It happened as a natural outcome. One last thing needs to be very clear. We have not tried to prove that existence has already happened. What we have explored is this: can probability patterns exist that make existence possible? When such a probability pattern stabilizes, it means only one thing. A probability pattern with a high chance of existence can be defined. Nothing more than that is claimed in this video. How existence emerges from such a pattern is a much larger topic. That will come in future episodes. This is a probability pattern. It is stable. It is capable of giving birth to existence. That's all. What we are uncovering here is not the result of existence. It is the possibilities of existence. You cannot jump directly from nothingness to existence. In between, there is a vast evolutionary process. Many probability patterns exist together. They interact. They influence one another. Some become stable. Some disappear. At a point where this interaction converges, we begin to see a state we can call something. How did it converge? What shape did it take? What laws emerged? That is not the scope of this video. This video is the foundation. Existence is not magical. It is not an instant decision. It is not intentional creation. Existence is a possible outcome that slowly emerges from probability.